Hello and welcome to another deep dive into the loop. I'm a kid with a robot and a cop car in the middle of nowhere. There might be dinosaurs. Yeah. Hello and welcome. I'm your grumpy guide to all things gaming, the OGGM. We're continuing with part 3 of our deep dive into Tales of the Loop, my current favorite role-playing game. Probably do this one or two more times. Without doing actual live plays, there's really not much more I can talk about this game. So this is part 3A, because we're going to do two parts about the same topic, and that is the settings of Tales from the Loop. Now, Tales from the Loop could be set anywhere. Everywhere has kids, and everywhere has its own weird quasi-mythology, tales of weirdness. Everywhere went through the 80s or the 90s. Everywhere has nostalgia, no matter where you are in the world. And everywhere has, areas of just bleak, beautiful, open landscape, which is just filled with potential of imagination. So you could set the loop wherever you are, you could set the loop. And you probably should if you're running a Tales from Loop, run it someplace you know. If you've never been to Sweden and you don't really understand this section on Sweden, set it in your hometown. Just explain they built it there in the mountains or whatever. So the two main settings in the core book are Boulder City, Nevada, and the islands in Sweden. Sweden, yeah. So today we're going to talk about the one I know more intimately, and that is Boulder City, Nevada. Now, why did they choose, of all the places in the United States of America, that particular part? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Not that anything exceptional happened in the 80s in Nevada or Boulder City, but because it is relevant to its closeness to the Hoover Dam. It's literally right there. Boulder City was the city that was sort of one of the cities that was built up during the construction of the Hoover Dam to support the people that were there. So it went from a rough and tumble mining town, basically, to a town with a lot of engineers and scientists, to now just a town with people who, don't really fit in anywhere, or either have jobs supporting the dam, supporting the businesses that are along the dam, or just, retirees and people like that. So it's a very interesting city with a very interesting history, from gunslingers and outlaws to high-tech, science-y engineers types with cutting the edge of technology, building Boulder City and inventing new technologies to carve that area out and create the Hoover Dam, and then create the system that powers everything below the Hoover Dam, because the Hoover Dam supplies so much electrical power, all that water, and then of course building up with the safety features and just how do we manage this water flow and all this thing. So it's got a great, interesting history related to the Hoover Dam, and a lot of because it's in the desert, you have sand, glass. Glass means a lot of high-tech companies use glass and use sand to create glass and stuff, and glass is used in all sorts of aspects of technology. So again, Boulder City, Nevada has a long history of just being a site of high-tech and industrialism and engineering, and moving forward with just this sort of old west, middle of nowhere, beautiful desert along the river, the Hoover Dam, and that powering it, and just the stories and the history surrounded with the Hoover Dam and the mythology of the Hoover Dam. And then of course it's Nevada, which means we're dealing with the myths of the old west catching up with the time, and the people crossing the desert to get to California. We have Route 66, we have the Lincoln Highway, we've got the rise of organized crime, because Boulder City is a hop, skip, and a jump from Las Vegas. We have the rise of Las Vegas, and just how Las Vegas changed this desolate desert, because Nevada is pretty much just desert, with some mountains and a few sparse forests, and some great snow. But mostly it's just desert, and because of the gambling and because of just the freewheeling nature it creates this very unusual mythology about this state in Arizona and the states around Nevada, and just the Route 66, the Lincoln Highway, Highway 14, the Hoover Dam, we've got Nevada, we've got Boulder City. Nevada has its history with the nuclear tests. So we've got a long history out there. What the fuck is going on in the desert? What is the military doing, dating back to the early 40s when they were doing the early tests with the weapons? Mysterious storehouses in the middle of nowhere, the desert, Indiana Jones shit. And then, of course, we have UFOs. Yeah, long. I mean, Area 51 is a hop, skip, and a jump from Boulder City, Colorado. Roswell, New Mexico, not that far from Nevada. I mean, it's a couple-hour drive. The so-called American UFO corridor, the area of our country where 90% of all the UFO sightings have been, as long as those have been documented. So we're going back to the 20s and the 30s and, the 10s, and just this constant sightings in this area. And Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of California, you have this what's constantly sort of referred to as the UFO corridor. So you have this a long history of weirdness. Also, a lot of the cryptids, the mythological, possibly real creatures, the Bigfoots of the United States of America. A lot of the states that have cryptid sightings, from the jackalope to whatever, to the El Chupacabra, to the Burning Man. Again, that's all. A lot of that is in that area: Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. You have the mountains, and then you have California. Then you have this huge, just chunks and chunks of just big empty land, and people living in the middle of nowhere and saying they see things. So you got UFOs, you've got cryptids, you've got a long history of westward expansion, people coming through but never actually settling. You've got Route 66, you've got the Lincoln Highway, you've got Route 14, you've got all these people crossing, you've got the stories of the Old West. I mean, that is literally, when you think of the Old West, you think of Texas, you think of Arizona, you think of New Mexico, you think of Nevada, you think of, a civilization and gold mining got to California. We just had these long, empty, vast, beautiful, tragically beautiful things. So we got the mythology of the Old West. Then we have the World War I and World War II, and the time frame between World War I and World War II, and this scientific optimism of the atomic age, and the tests of the bomb, the rumors of the bomb, the idea that there's going to be this optimistic future, and it is reflected in the art and the architecture, the comic books, the science fiction of the time. And we were talking, these are the births of Buck Rogers and stuff like that, and Johnny Quest and all that stuff is coming out of that early phase. And then of course we have the Hoover Dam getting built, and just everything that is associated with the Hoover Dam, the mythology of the Hoover Dam, the history of the Hoover Dam, how the Hoover Dam changed an entire state by redirecting waterfall and creating this new technology. We have this influx of science and engineers and weird tales of experimental airplanes, and weird tales of dogfights, and weird tales of Russian spies. I mean, just so much was going on in Nevada at this point in time. And you have Area 51, you have a lot of government experimenting and testing that was doing out there, and there's still huge areas of the deserts that are considered off limits. I mean, and plus then also you've got the airplane graveyard out there, you've got the neon light graveyard out there, you've just got miles and miles of desert and this beautiful, desolate, empty, haunting desert that has its own song. If you stand out there in the dark at 2:00 in the morning, the desert sings, it makes noises. So combine all that, and that is why, of all the places, they chose that if we were ever going to build something like the Loop and start experimenting with the weird cross-dimensional technology that the Loop insinuates that they were doing, desert is going to be it. Nevada is going to be it, and building it near the Hoover Dam makes a lot of sense because you have this incredible source of electricity. So if I'm going to build a super collider, transdimensional, mighty graviton, whatever it is, that's my place. Because one, there's nobody there. I'm not going to be bothered. Two, I've got a amazing source of power that is, at the time that they were constructing it. We're talking the 80s, so 70s, late 70s, early 80s. So that's a lot of energy. Nevada, not a lot going on in that part of the world. Nobody would notice if a rip in the fabric of space-time opened in the Nevada desert and a couple dinosaurs walked through and Christopher Columbus and a spaceman. There's nobody there. So that's why they chose Boulder City, Nevada. There's that long history, the long mythology, the long connection with Area 51 and the Hoover Dam and just government experiments and the nuclear bomb and just the Old West and gangsters and Las Vegas and just it is. I mean, people say Portland is the weirdness capital of the United States, but there's a lot of weird shit out in that desert, and it has a much, much longer history of just strangeness, all the way dating back to like the mythology of the Native Americans and just everything, Civil War, and just everything that went on in our very short history. I mean, obviously, the history of the United States pales in comparison to the history of Europe and the history of Sweden and all the things that they've been through. But if you have to just percolate all the weirdness of the mythology of America, a lot of it is Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, that chunk. So there you go. That is why, of all the places they could have built one of the two settings in Tales in the Loop, they chose Boulder City, Nevada. In the next installment, we'll talk about the Swedish islands that they chose to set and why they chose to set them there. And then we'll probably talk about why the 80s. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this rambling insight into Americana. I will talk to you soon.